So the scope of today's 2-hour session is towards the planning phase of PPI when you are considering applying for a SNSF IICT grant. It's aimed at clinical research professionals. And it's not a course or a training on all aspects of implementing PPI in clinical research. And therefore, we will also not discuss other sections of the IICT core. I already gave you a little overview on today's agenda. The good news is we will have a little bio break in the middle of our session. So around 4:45, we will have a 15 minutes coffee break after the first two presentations, and then continue with PPI in practice and with useful information from the SNSF. What are the objectives of today's training? First of all, we would like you to understand the concept of PPI. And at the end of this course, you should be able to translate the PPI principles to your study and to your project, that you will be able to create a plan for PPI, that you recognize the value of CTUs as partner, and that you can apply the PPI requirements in the IICT core. And before I start with my presentation, I would actually like to ask you a question. And I would like to know from you whether you already have experience with patient and public involvement. If yes, please click yes. If no, then please answer with no. So we have around 30 people on our call today who already have experience, which is great, and around 68% on the call who have no experience yet. And we really hope that you will have a better understanding also for getting some experience with PPI. So PPI is one of the key strategic priorities at the SCTO. We want to implement patient and public involvement in academic clinical research. So when we talk about patient and public involvement, what do we mean? The definition by Involve, a UK government-funded program under the National Institute for Health Research, defines PPI as research being carried out with or by members of the public rather than to, about, or for them. That actually means with patient and public involvement, we mean that patients and the public are actively involved and engaged in clinical research projects as full partners. They are not taking part in a clinical trial. This is the big difference between involvement and participation. And when we talk about patients, we actually use the definition by UPAPI, which means the public in general, individual patients, patient organization representatives, but also caregivers, patient advocates, or patient experts. And you will also find the term PPI contributors throughout our presentation today. So why should PPI be integrated into academic clinical research? Well, from an ethical perspective, we can say that today's research is tomorrow's medicine, is tomorrow's therapy. Patients should have an influence into clinical research as they are directly affected by the outcome, along the lines of the motto, nothing about us without us. PPI also supports the patient empowerment. Patients can play a critical role, and it helps people to gain control over their own lives, and it addresses their right to have a voice in clinical research. Academic clinical research is actually financed by public money, and PPI can help to make funding more transparent and involve those who pay for it in the end. And PPI can help democratize clinical research and make clinical research more accountable. What are the direct benefits for your study, and how? What can it improve or increase? It can certainly increase the relevance of your study. Patients can support identifying research questions that matter most to them, or help prioritize research agenda. It can also improve the recruitment strategy by connecting you with the appropriate patient community, or improve the retention by giving advice on the feasibility of the study process. And patients can support you with dissemination of the study results to a wider public. And how do you find your PPI contributors? Well, unfortunately, there is no one-stop shop at the moment. What we do recommend is align internally, or ask your CTU for support, identify and contact relevant patient organizations, or post a call for interest on your website or on social media channels. You can also contact IICT Switzerland and ask for support within the IICT network. You can contact us at the SCTO, and we will try to help you and share the information within our network. You can use the IICT Connect matchmaking platform, or you can also have a look on our PPI mapping. I will give you some more information on the PPI mapping later on and what it is. For this, we do recommend that you develop information material that clearly explains your research project in lay language, describes the role of the PPI contributors, information material that specifies the knowledge, experience, skills your PPI contributor should bring, and information about the amount of work, time, as well as compensation. Where can you find those information or more information on patient and public involvement? We do have a dedicated section on the PPI on the SCTO website. There you can find PPI resources with information that I just explained. For example, the PPI fact sheets, which contains an overall concept of PPI, addresses the benefit and challenges, and how PPI can be incorporated into clinical trials. We also have a guide for researchers to address PPI in clinical trials. And the objective of this document is really to support you to identify PPI opportunities that inspire effective and meaningful involvement of patients. We also give some examples or recommendation possibilities for PPI using the attached graphic, starting from the planning phase of a clinical trial, during the clinical study project, or also after the clinical study project. I'm not going into more details here, as you will get concrete examples later on, and you will see this graphic a couple more times in other presentations from my colleagues. Having said that, these examples are just recommendations and examples, and there is no one size no size fits all. Therefore, it's very important that you see what fits best to your project. To implement PPI in a sustainable way, we also commit to remunerate PPI contributors. And for that, we have SCTU remuneration policy for PPI activities. This policy outlines our commitment for reimbursement of expenses, such like travel or accommodation, as well as compensation for PPI activities. It's committed to fair financial compensation informed by the principles of equity, and is based on a blended model approach, which means compensation is based on two criteria. Criteria 1 is the level of involvement, and criteria 2, the skills capacity needed for the PPI activity. To give you a bit more information about that, when we talk about level of involvement for a PPI activity, we have 4 levels, which you see here. The first one, providing information. The PPI contributor can respond to specific questions and provide general advice. Contribute at decision-making level, number 3, or take over or lead specific parts of the projects. And the different PPI activities may require different skills and competencies. And therefore, according to this overview from IICT, we can distinguish between medical expertise, systems expertise, methodological expertise, and also the personal framework. And this 2 level then helps you define the amount for the compensation. You will get the concrete examples on how this can be done later on from my colleagues. Then we also have PPI templates that support you in implementing PPI. The first one is when you are looking for potential PPI contributors, the participation request for PPI activities template, which outlines the duration of the engagement, expected time and commitment, the compensation, as well as the required knowledge, experience, and skills, and certainly a description of the PPI activities. And the other document is the written agreement template between PPI contributors and researchers, research institution. And this document outlines the basic terms and conditions of a partnership, such as the overall objective of the PPI contributions, confidentiality expectation for all parties, disclosure of potential conflicts of interest, and so on. And we are currently also working on a template that could help you planning, tracking, and evaluating your PPI activities. Another thing what you might find useful is our PPI mapping. This is what I had mentioned in the beginning. And we actually wanted to know what kind of PPI initiatives or projects do already exist in academic clinical research in Switzerland, and have therefore done an online survey. Status October, we have identified 48 projects and initiatives throughout Switzerland. And these initiatives and projects are published on our website in a tabular overview with information about the project or initiative, the organization, the region where it's happening, and also with detailed information on the PPI activities. This is certainly not a complete list, but it gives you an idea, and it will also be regularly updated when we hear about new projects and or initiatives. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and would like to hand over to my colleague Sandra Kohlmeier.
Thank you very much, Tamara, for your nice presentation and also for your kind introduction in the beginning, and of course for having me here today and letting me talk about PPI and in the IICT Cohort 23 and how to best partner with your CTU. And I will now share my screen, although yours is still open, but I think I can do it anyway.
I can stop. Yes, I can stop.
1 second only. I'll have it in 1 moment. So, voila. I hope you can see, and yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, so let's start with this topic. And here is the short agenda which we will go through. So first, we will have a look about what's about the process and the timelines regarding the IICT call this year. And of course, the focus is on PPI, as Tamara explained. This is on PPI today and not covering all aspects of the IICT call. Then we will go to the requirements, and in the end, we will have a look at the CTU support and what you can expect from the CTU, or how that you should involve the CTU as well. But first, I would like to take the motto of today, so PPI and involvement, and I would like to involve you first and have an idea about what is your experience with the SNSF IICT call. So do you already have some experience? And I will start the, so now the poll should be open to you, and I will be happy if you vote a little bit and let me know whether you already have some experience with maybe a former SNSF IICT call in the past, or whether it's really new to you and you have your research project and you want to submit it maybe the first time. So I let you a little bit vote for 1 or 2 seconds. We have 80% now, so I think it is fine. And I will show the results to you. I hope you can see them now. So most of you have no experience with the SNSF IICT call, so I guess it will be maybe the first time that you have to submit or want to submit your project to this grant. And that's very good, because then I think you will hopefully learn a lot from this online training today. And for those who already have experience, there are some new things, and this is maybe something that you might also be interested. And so what is new is the date. So the submission deadline for the first thing, which is very important at the IICT call, which is the letter of intent, is the 26th of May. And this year it's the same submission day for the PPI preparatory grant. I will explain to you what this is in a minute. It's the same day. And then the next deadline, which you should remember, is the 1st of November, which is the deadline to submit your full proposal, the full application. But first, you have to check whether your research project really fits to the IICT call. And therefore, here. And therefore, I have summarized the main things which are important for your research project to fulfill. So the IICT call is really for clinical trials with an unresearched topic, or let's say with a medical need or a social need. And very, very important, the clinical trial has to be important for patients. And that's also the point why PPI is so important for this call now. It has to be outside of the industry focus, and it has to be a trial which is randomized and controlled. And it is regarding PPI, it is the third time now, so the third year, where you have to address PPI in the letter of intent and also in the proposal. And it is also another point which in regards to patient involvement and patient relevant outcomes is that the SNF highly recommends to consider patient-reported outcome measures, so PROMs. And here is one link to the International Consortium of Health and Outcome Measures with internationally recognized PROMs for different areas of research, or you can have a look whether there might be something which can be also important for your clinical research project. And regarding the PPI, it is also important to know that it's the second time that the SNF is giving a PPI preparatory grant. What is the PPI preparatory grant? So it is money that can be given to the researchers up to 5,000 francs, to be precise, to the researchers if they want to involve PPI representatives or contributors in the application preparation. So in the preparation of your full proposal, which you have to submit the 1st of November. And in this phase, if you there do involve PPI contributors, then you can have a preparatory grant. There you can, of course, prepare your application, but it is also for the planning of PPI activities later on during the entire research project. And what do you have to do? You have to fill in the patient engagement plan, it is so-called, in the letter of intent. And you can also use this then for the preparatory grant. And this patient engagement plan, I will show you in 1 minute, but it shows the PPI activities that you want to do in your planning phase with a budget. And what is new for this year, for this submission in 2023, is that the submission of the PPI preparatory grant is together at the same day as the letter of intent, and this is the 26th of May. And here you can see the timeline. So as I said, here is the submission deadline for letter of intent and preparatory grant. And then last year, at least, it was like this, that every research group who has submitted their interests for the preparatory grant has also, the research group also got the preparatory grant, and it is for the time of 1st of July until 1st of November. So for the 4 months, this is the maximum duration where you can use this preparatory grant. Now you might also ask, yeah, what is for the PPI activities which are later in my proposal, so for the whole trial? I will come back to this as well. Of course, you can also put this budget into the proposal, but I will come back to this later. And now I would like to have another break for you, and I would like to know when do you think PPI activities should be integrated in a clinical research project? Because, as I said, this is what you also should think about if you want to participate for the preparatory grant, PPI preparatory grant. You have to think about the PPI activities for your research project. And I would like to know from you, what do you think? When should these activities be integrated in a clinical research project? Is it from the beginning of a clinical research project on, during the entire research project? Or is it depending on the clinical research project, or it should not be integrated at all? And I think it is possible that you click on several of these points if you want to. If you think several of the answers are correct for you, then you can click on several ones. Yeah, thanks a lot for voting. I let you a little bit longer until we reach the 80% at least. Okay, great. So now we have even reached 88%. I think we can stop and I can show you the result. I'm really happy that most of you, so 84%, think that it is very good to have integrate PPI activities already from the beginning of the clinical trial, and that around 40% think that it is maybe also helpful if you have them during the entire clinical research project, but it can also be that it depends which kind of PPI activities can depend on the clinical research project. Great, thanks a lot for participating to this poll. And this is what we think when and how PPI should be integrated. So it is important that we think that PPI activities should be integrated for each clinical research project. And we think that there is no research project where no PPI activity or question at all exists. So we think it is possible for each project, and it should be during the entire project. And if you integrate it earlier, it is best for you because it gets the greatest benefit for you. So this means right from the beginning at the planning phase. And that's why the SNF has also integrated this preparatory grant, because he has realized how important it is to have these PPI activities already from the beginning on. And what kind of activities? Yeah, this is very individual and depends on your research project. So coming to the requirements, what is needed and how does it look like? So there are two different parts of the requirements. One is, what do you need for the letter of intent and the preparatory grant, where you have to submit 26th of May. And the second one is, what do you need for the proposal, 1st of November? And we start, of course, with the one, the deadline is the nearest. And this is what you have to do. You have to enter your activities that you are planning in the patient engagement plan. And this is actually how it will look like in the template for the letter of intent. And it is the basis also for the preparatory grant, which will be submitted, as I said before, the same time as the letter of intent. But it is in a separate submission on the My SNF side. So when you have logged into My SNF, you will find two different parts, the letter of intent and the preparatory grant. And what do you have to fulfill or fill in here? So first of all, you should fill in your PPI activities that you are planning in the planning phase. So before you will submit the proposal. And please enter each of these activities separately. And then you have to say, okay, what is the concrete role or what's the task? And also what are the expectations that I have for the PPI contributors, which will participate to the PPI activity. And of course, it is also important also for you that this activity has a benefit or an added value, and you should describe this here as well. And of course, the budget, there it is meant the amount of money for the PPI activity before the proposal submission. So what these are the 5,000 max up to 5,000 francs preparatory grant, which you can use here for all the planning phase PPI activities. And as Tamara mentioned before, there is the SCTO PPI, okay, I called it compensation policy, but it is the remuneration, and it's so hard to pronounce that, so that's why I called it compensation policy, but it's remuneration policy. And you can have a look there if you want to decide how much, what kind of money will be reimbursed, and you can have a look there. And for the preparatory grant and the letter of intent, these are some examples of PPI activities. Tamara showed you these activities before, or some examples. And what is very important, it's these two phases which are concerned here for this part of letter of intent and preparatory grant. So the identification of the research question and the studies design and funding application. And I've just entered a few things here, but I will not go into detail too much because there are some more examples and concrete examples in the next talk. So coming to the requirements of the proposal with submission date 1st of November. Here you have two parts, Part A and Part B. Part A is describing your activities which you have already done. So before the proposal submission, hopefully with the preparatory grant. And B is showing the activities that you are still planning during and after the trial. So as I said, Part A, it is describing the activities which you have already done in the preparation phase with the preparatory grant. And this is how it will look like, the template. It is mainly looking like the patient engagement plan in the letter of intent and for the preparatory grant, but the only thing which is new is this column here, and there you should explain what was the effect of the PPI activities which you have done in your preparation phase for the planning and the design of your clinical research project. And of course, if you have done more activities in this planning phase than you have entered in the letter of intent or the preparatory grant, of course, you can also describe these additional activities here. And the Part B looks like this. Activities planned, PPI activities planned during and after your clinical research project. There they distinguish between the different phases. You might recognize them from before. And I will go through it again in the next slide. So what is your activity in the management, study process, data analysis, in the dissemination, and later then after the trial, dissemination and in the evaluation. And these rows, columns here, what's the role and what's the objective, you might recognize. It's the same as in the letter of intent. So here, please describe the same as you have done already, but of course, for the new activities. And this is what I have mentioned before. For the budget of the PPI proposal, you can, of course, also state a budget for these activities which you're planning during and after your trial. And here you can use under My SNF, you can go under cost category, patient and public involvement, and enter your budget there. Yeah, and this is again the activities or the phases which are meant for the proposal. So the management and study process, the data analysis, for example, if you want to include a PPI contributor for the evaluation of the risk and benefit aspects for patients, and for example, in the safety monitoring, for example, in a data safety monitoring board, or if you want to have them improve the understandability of the communication of your study results in the end. And very importantly, for example, if you want to evaluate, and this is something you really should do, evaluate your PPI activities and have some lessons learned for your future projects so that you really know, okay, what was very good and what can be improved. But as well, here there will be some more examples and some concrete examples in the next talk. So coming to the CTU support. As you might know, there's a network of CTUs in Switzerland, and there are 7 CTU members from Bern, Geneva, Lausanne, Lugano, St. Gallen, Zurich, and Basel. And I'm sure one of these CTUs is your CTU, And they are very happy to help you with the IICT call and also, I guess, with PPI. So just contact them and ask them for support. And I can just give you an example from the DKF in Basel. Here we offer free of charge support regarding consulting. So if you have any question regarding PPI, for example, where can I find PPI contributors, or what kind of contributors should I integrate into my PPI activities, or how can I overcome some challenges which I have, or any questions, you can come and see us for a consulting. Or we can also support you if you think it might be helpful if we review your PPI plan or the cost estimation, or if you think, please help us with PPI representatives. We are not sure how to find them. And for finding PPI representatives or contributors, for example, we have a network with the USB Patient Advisory Board. We can also contact them, and maybe there is a perfect match for you. We have also a lot of information regarding PPI on our website. And I also would like to draw your attention to the first Swiss patient expert training, which is from the EuPati Switzerland. And if you have somebody in mind and you think, I need a PPI expert, but maybe this person is not trained yet, and now you have the training for this person. So the registration deadline is end of March 23. And the link is also integrated here. What else can we offer for you? At least from the DKF in Basel. So in case you're in the phase of developing your research question, of course, it also makes sense to have a literature search. There we have some information sheets and also some people who can help there to make things easier and faster. And in case you have already your research question, and now would like to have an overview and keep also the overview regarding the milestones of your submission to the SNF IICT call, then we have key points plan developed. It looks like this. So you have from checking whether your project is suitable for the SNF IICT call over to submission of the letter of intent, doing the PPI activities for the planning phase, until full proposal and also rebuttal letter, until you hopefully have your approval. We have this plan, and it's not only this plan, but it's a lot of information to all of these 11 points here with additional help. So it might be helpful for you. And now coming to the time, when should you contact your CTU? It is quite easy. So please come as early as possible, because it is the same as the PPI activities. The earlier, the better. For example, for the letter of intent, the SNF strongly recommends that you involve a CTU, and if you don't have a letter of commitment from one of the CTUs, it is highly recommended from the SNF. So it is great if you could integrate the CTU, your local CTU, into your plans and come as early as possible. But we help you whenever you come. So I'm finished and I'm in time. I just have a Q&A. So if you have some questions already, feel free, and you can either enter them into the chat, or you can raise your hand. Are there some questions?
Otherwise, Sandra, we can also keep the questions for later on. Mm-hmm. Because there will be again an opportunity for you to ask questions. But of course, if someone has a question right now, feel free. Otherwise, there is another possibility towards the end of today's session.
Okay. Yeah, then I just have to thank you for your attention, and I will end with at least my take-home message for you, which is that I hope that PPI will get the new normal in Switzerland as well. And this not only for the SNSF IICT call, but also beyond. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Hello, everyone. Hope you had a nice little break. And thank you very much for being back for the second part of our online session. And with that, I actually hand over to Cindy Roth and to Marie Méan for the PPI in practice part.
Thank you, Tamara. So good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon and co-present this PPI in practice section with Marie. So, doesn't work. Yes. So let us shortly introduce ourselves. So I'm Cindy Roth. I'm the manager of the research consent unit of the SHUV and also researcher's advisor, with a rather new mission, that is to offer support to SHUV investigators to help them set up their PPI activities. Our unit is part of the Clinical Research Center. Marie, I let you introduce you. Marie? Marie? She's not present? Aha. Okay, well, I will start to present my slides, and then as soon as she will be back, she will take over her slides. Let's try to do it like this. So first of all, let us go through the different phases of your trial and see how and when you could involve PPI contributors. So as you have already seen in other presentation, there are more or less three phases where you can involve them. First of all, during your preparation phase, while you are preparing your proposal, you can involve them to help you identify or refine your research question in order to be sure that this question meets their needs or concerns. They can help you also prioritize your endpoints or outcomes and help you also establish contact with target patient groups. They can also help you to adapt the methodology or study design of your protocol and help you revise the documents that you prepare for your study. So concretely, you can involve them to participate to surveys, focus groups, individual interviews to collect their opinion and visions. But you can also ask them to review, for example, your study lay summary to make it more understandable and clear for the public. So we should have, yeah, thank you, Marie. I started without you. Okay.
No, nice to meet you. I'm sorry, I just missed the beginning. Okay, so I'm here just to make my experience regarding PPI a bit more concrete. It's not an SNF project that I have here to present, but it's also a project with the national funding. It's a national data stream that was funded by the Swiss Personalized Health Network on the PHRT funds last year. And then next slide. The goal, I don't think is very important for you, but just it's about the quality of care of medical hospitalized patients, and particularly about low value care practices. So next slide.
So I presented it.
Exactly.
So it's your part.
Yeah, what we wanted here to stress is there is two phases. How it was presented before. There is the phase before the project. And this is the intended part when we thought about how we could include patients in the project. So we did actually a consultation. It was not the CTU, concretely it was in Geneva. We had a consultation with a group of PPI experts. And after this consultation, we decided to have a small sample of patients. The challenge was to have patients in accordance with the project. As I told you, it's about hospitalized patient, quality of care. So we had to find not too young patients, maybe some who had an experience of hospitalization, and also because it's a national project, it was important for the representativeness to have French and German speaking patients, ideally also English speakers, because you will see after how it could be helpful also, on male and female. So at this phase, it was not so easy to find exactly the patient we needed. So we did with what we had. And we were also criticized for this because we had mostly female of 50 years old, more or less. So it was not the perfect sample, but this is also the reality. And then we asked this sample of patients to help us to write the lay summary. And this is why I was speaking about the language. Lay summaries are often presented in project in English. So we can decide to co-write it in French and then to translate it. For this project, we had the chance to find a patient expert who had who is a native English speaker. So she was able to write the lay summary for us. On the second point, we decided to design together some question about experience of hospitalization. This was done with 2 patients, and then we pilot the question on 2 samples of hospitalized patients. So this was the second point, and then we had also discussion about how to include the patient in future in the board as members, and this was the 3 topics we performed in the first phase. This is an example of the executive summary. You can find here some guidelines. It's not so easy to write good lay summary. Just for the anecdote, when I write my lay summary myself and then I share it because I was really naive at the beginning to the patient, she told me, yes, it's very good, but it's understandable just for maybe university people, well, with a very high literacy in health. So I had to rethink completely how to write a lay summary. I learned a lot with this patient contributor. So maybe next slide. Here, it's not the full lay summary we wrote, but the 2 points I wanted to stress here is the first is the reading age. Actually, in the guidelines, if you read them, the reading age of a lay summary should be about 12 years old. We put a reading age of 14. You have some algorithm open source on the web that can proofread your lay summary to make this reading age apparent. And so reading age 14, it's okay, but it's a bit higher than recommended. And here you can see how it's really easy, and you can put an example of what is, I don't know, the disease you are studying in your project, but here it was about low value care, and really the words are easy to understand, and there are some concepts very clear on down to the earth for the patients.
Okay, thank you, Marie. So then for the next part, you can involve those PPI contributors during your trial. And how could they be involved? They could be involved during the management and the study process to provide advisory support during the whole study project, for example, by entering an advisory or a scientific steering committee. They can help you develop patient information and other material, or review your study documents to make them more clear and understandable for future participants. They can support communication with study participants also and help you in the recruitment of these participants. And they can finally also be involved in data analysis in order to provide inputs on those data and help you maybe interpret the study data with the regards of patient conditions.
Thank you. So here we wanted to go on regarding how the PPI could contribute after the project is financed. For you, it's maybe hypothetical, but it's in practice some example that can maybe help you have ideas. So now the challenge is to recruit the good patient. And you had some slide before where to recruit the patient. From my experience, it was mostly on network, using our network on social media. And then it's also important to target the population. So I think it's also good for the project to describe how you will target the population. For our project, it was a population of comorbid patients with at least 2 diseases on a previous hospitalization. They should be French and German speaking, and to have just a good balance between male and female. And at this stage, we clarified who could come in the executive board meeting. We decided also, because we had to describe it in the consortium agreement, that the patient will not have a voting power if they were present in the executive board, whereas in the scientific boards, their presence would be much more helpful. And I must say that it's not so easy to find this expert patient that could be in the executive board, whereas for scientific board meetings, much more easier. Next slide.
Okay, so then what will happen after the trial? So after the trial, PPI representatives can be very important to help you communicate about your study results. For example, helping you summarize study results in lay language again, or support study results communication to participants and public, for example, through social media, but also through scientific meetings or congress. They can also participate in article writing to help you communicate clearly those results. But they are also very important for the evaluation phase in order to give feedbacks about PPI actions and impacts, which is very important. I will come back on this point just after you, Marie.
So maybe one thing here, we are not experts from PPI, and this is maybe something also learned during this project. There are some easy points you can put in the project when writing the letter of intent or after for the proposal. I'm sure if your project gets financed, you will have some light on you, and you can take the opportunity of this light to maybe foresee that you will also communicate. And this communication can be taken as part of the PPI concept. Well, in P there is public, and the public should also be informed about your project. So here it's an example how we actually communicate at the institution level. Colleagues are your public also. On next slide, if there is some press release about the study, you can foresee that it will possibly be, and you can also make sure it will happen. And it's something that you can foresee in the application, saying that you will disseminate the information about your project to the public. And here it's an example of an article that was in the 20 minutes paper. There is, you can put the next slide. In such articles, there is a lot of comments. So you can use the comments maybe to drive the direction of your project. It's also some public contribution. You can look next slide here. We had 90 comments on when we did an analysis regarding how on what was in the comments. We could make some priorities. We know that the patient and the public were really keen to know about medication, about price, and so it's something you can easily describe in the project. That is something that you will do on it also at very low cost. Next.
Okay, and coming back to PPI reporting, this part is very important also because it will help you communicate about the impact of PPI in research and show that PPI implication is very important to improve clinical research and optimize clinical trials. It will also help identify best practices and help future investigators to help them set up their PPI activities. And finally, it will improve the quality and consistency of PPI actions. So don't forget this step. There are some guidance that exists. For example, the guidance for reporting involvement of patients and the public, GRIP, which was published in BMG in 2017, a few years ago now, which was the first international guidance for reporting PPI in health and social research. There you can find a short form and a long form that guides you on how to evaluate PPI actions and impacts. And coming soon, there will be the SCTO worksheet PPI feedback form that will also help you for this step. It will be published on the SCTO website. So then coming back to how to implicate PPI contributors. So Tamara already said a few words about this. So when you have to engage a PPI representative, you really have to think about when you would like to involve them during before your trial, during your trial, after your trial, and at which level you would like to involve these people. Is it to provide information, to give advices on specific questions, to contribute at a decision-making level, or as leaders for specific parts of the project? And so you clearly have to think about those points. And in order to set the activities, what you also have to take into account is really the resources you have within your research team, both human and financial, the available time that you have. It would be completely different if you have 4 months, as it is the case for IICT calls, instead of 3 years, for example. And also the research team experience in PPI activities, because you won't go into complicated activities such as maybe focus groups if you don't have qualitative experience or experience in qualitative research. You would rather choose a survey, for example, or more individual interviews. So really you have to also take into account those points in order to set up the activities you would like to propose. And once you have decided what you would like to do with PPI contributors, then you can fill the SCTO template, participation request for PPI activities. And then these documents, you can share it in order to recruit your PPI representatives. Then one important point where we have a lot of questions generally is the remuneration and reimbursement. So as Tamara said, we know now, you know, that PPI contributors have the right to be compensated for their experience, but also for their work time. And travel costs have to be reimbursed also. And this is all explained, as it was said before, in the SCTO remuneration policy. And here you just have an example on how to set the amount that has to be paid. And this amount is really adapted according not only to the level of engagement, is it for information, advice, joint decision-making or leadership, but also the expertise of your contributor. So for example, if you plan to engage a contributor to give you advice on study documents, for example, and that this PPI contributor has an intermediate high level of expertise, then you can imagine that you can pay this contributor 90 francs per hour. This is just an example to show you how it can be modulated according to those two levels, the expertise and the level of engagement. But for sure, those amounts have to be adapted according to the policy of your institution. Then coming back to the documents you are going to fill for your IICT call. So as it was also said before, for your letter of intent, you will have to fill in the patient engagement plan. Here I just showed you a few examples of what could be, for example, written in this table with 3 examples. For example, you can propose during the preparatory phase to send a survey to, for example, 50 patients to consult them about the research question and study endpoints in order to be sure that they are aligned with patient concern and needs. And this would cost 2,500 francs. Then you can ask 2 expert patients to review the survey results in order to adjust study protocol and endpoints according to the results of this survey. And this would cost more or less 500 francs. And then finally, you can also ask 2 expert patients to review your lay summary to make it more understandable and clear for the public. And this will be more or less 400 francs. And so the total budget for the preparatory phase would be 3,400 francs. So those are just examples to show you how it could be filled. Then when you will have to write your final proposal, you will have to plan your PPI actions for during the trial and after the trial. So during the trial, you can involve your patients, your PPI contributors to review, for example, patient information and consent documents to ensure about understandability and clarity. You can also involve PPI contributors to recruit your future participants to the study in order to optimize the recruitment. And you can also ask PPI contributors to help you review research data with the patient perspective and discuss those results. And as previously said, for the after the trial, you can ask PPI contributors to help you communicate study results and discuss also with physicians about the experience of patients being part of the trial from the design of the study until the publication of the results. And you can also involve PPI contributors to evaluate the impacts of PPI contributors, for example, through focus groups. So these are just a few numbers from the field. So here in the CHUV last year, there were 6 projects, IICT projects that were proposed. Among those, during the preparatory phase, 4 projects organized a survey, 4 organized roundtable discussions or focus groups, 2 organized individual interviews, 2 organized promotion meetings about the study. 1 made a review of information and consent documents, and 1 organized a review of lay summary. What were the actions planned with PPI for during and after the trial for those 6 projects? So for 4 of these projects, PPI contributors were planned during the study data review. For 4 projects, there was study documents production or revision, which was planned with PPI. 3 projects planned to evaluate PPI impacts with PPI contributors. 2 projects wanted to involve PPI in study promotion. 2 projects plan to involve PPI contributors to communicate and disseminate study results. And finally, for 2 projects, PPI will be involved in the recruitment. What were the PPI positive outcomes that were reported from the field? So investigators said that those actions ensured that patients that there was an interest of patients regarding their study, that there could also highlight aspects that might cause problem in their study design and that could hinder recruitment. And by having seen those aspects, they could adjust their protocol and adapt it according to PPI contributors' visions, concerns, and needs. They could also prioritize endpoints and outcomes that matter most to patients. And they could write clear and understandable lay summary that was clearly sufficient and transparent for the public for a better communication about the research. Finally, we will end this presentation with a few advices. Marie, would you like to give those advices or I continue?
You have the floor, so just go on. I will just say a last word at the end. Just go on.
Perfect. So, first of all, don't forget that PPI takes time. So don't underestimate it. It has to be anticipated in order to fit in the 4 months schedule proposed in the IICT call, which is pretty short. So start PPI recruitment very early and do not set unachievable objectives. Plan actions according to available resources in your team and competencies within your research team. Don't forget to really fix PPI actions in your budget for the preparatory phase, but also for the full proposal, and do not underestimate the costs. Implicate other persons or structures such as CTU to help you set up PPI actions. Don't do it by yourself all alone. And don't forget to ask a letter to people or structures who offered support to set up PPI actions for the grant application. And last but not least, really fully involve PPI contributors, talk at the same level, make them part of your research team and take their opinion into account. So those were my messages. Marie, I let you close.
Yeah, thank you. I would maybe say just that it's very novel for all of us. It's only the third time for the FNS that PPI is mandatory, and I think there is not wrong or good way to do PPI. We can all find a way. There is some here ideas on guidance, but from my experience and short experience, I think we should be innovative. On the patient will maybe bring some ideas we had not in mind. On be open-minded. I think it's maybe my last message.
Thank you. And with this, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Cindy. I just realized I was on mute. Thank you very much, Cindy and Marie, for this interesting presentation. And with that, I'm actually sharing my screen again for last but not least, the presentation from Stephanie Buvelo and Larissa Aragon, PPI from the perspective of the Swiss National Science Foundation. And with that, I think you can see my screen. I will hand over the floor to you, Stephanie and Larissa.
So, hello, thank you very much for having me, for organizing this nice event. So it's my pleasure to present the SNSF perspective together with Larissa, who is a member of the IICT panel. And so in this presentation, can you go to the next slide, please? I will give you the background information on the program and with a focus on the PPI initiative at the SNSF. And then Larissa will give you insight into the IICT evaluation from a PPI representative perspective. And then I will come back with some practical recommendation for the researcher that will nicely match with the recommendations we hear so far. So the first call for the IICT program was in 2015. And in 2018, we've added a specific evaluation criteria about the patient involvement. And we realized pretty fast that we needed actually experts in the evaluation panel to be able to provide feedback on that criteria. So in 2020, we included the patient and public representative as an integral part of the evaluation panel. And last year, for the first time, we provided the PPI preparatory grant that Sandra already mentioned, that are those funds to support activities during which the PPI representative can provide input for the development of the grant application. And this is an overview of the call. Some information you've already seen today. This is focused more on what we do with the application. So on the 26th of May, you should submit the letter of intent and the PPI preparatory grant. We will check some formal aspect and give you feedback. And if you request the PPI preparatory grant, I think as Sandra mentioned, unless there's a formal problem that the applicant or the project is not eligible, we will grant you the money to perform the activities to get the PPI feedback. And that would give you 4 months to get some feedback on the full proposal that are due on the 1st of November. And then we have the external review, for which for now only clinical and statistical experts are involved. And then in the evaluation, as I mentioned, we have PPI experts that have a close look at this aspect during the evaluation. And then once we've decided which grants are funded or not, this is not fully over for us. We have the lifetime management where we follow up on the grants that are funded. For now, we focus on the preparation, the recruitment, and the follow-up, but we will soon use the guidelines from the CTO that Tamaha talked at the beginning to also ask you to report on those aspects. So they will not be forgotten once you get the grant. Yeah, and here I've shown below the evaluation criteria is just to show that we have 4 evaluation criteria and the patient public involvement is one of them. So it's a significant portion of the evaluation of your grant. And on the top, I have the panel composition. So there are 7 clinical experts, 4 PPI representatives, and 3 person with a statistical expertise, and everybody has an equal voice. So with that, I just want to show that for us, this is really an important aspect, and we try to put weight both in the criteria and in the people evaluating it. And with that, I will hand over to Larissa that will provide input on what the PPI experts actually do evaluate.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And it's a great pleasure to be here with so many wonderful women that share the same passion for PPI as I do. So I'm going to bring probably a bit of different perspective from my own personal experience being part of this work since a couple of years. So many of the aspects have been mentioned already, which is wonderful. And I'm going to try to bring a bit more a personal note into this. So we spoke a lot about lay summaries, and what I have seen is that some of the lay summaries are wonderful written. However, what patient experts are looking into those lay summaries is a very well structure into them. So it's, if we're going to talk about a specific substance or treatment process that you are going to test, describe those elements that you have in your study design, and don't be shy to share your research question and also some of your endpoints. All those elements are very important also in terms of who is going to join your clinical trial. So the more you can explain in that lay summary of what you're trying to accomplish, the better it will be. Then in terms of the preparation of your proposal, there are a couple of things. One is the consultation, as you already heard. And it's important to describe why are you doing certain things and how these PPI experts are contributing into your study design. I'm going to give you one example. I remember revising one of the proposals, and the inclusion criteria was the language, right? German, French. And my comment at that time was that this could be called language discrimination, which is an unknown ethical issue in a way. And this can be a problem with patients living in Switzerland, where they are excluded if they don't speak the national language. So try to think about clinical inclusion criteria, and language is certainly not necessarily one of them. There are other ways that we can overcome that barrier. In terms of the impact, so again, explain when you work with patient experts, how is this improving your proposal? And I think Marie shared already a nice example about the lay summary. Evidence is important. So we see every year PPI growing in terms of the importance. We also see a lot of very nice words being written around this topic. We would love to see more evidence in terms of with whom are you working. So in some research proposals, if you include names of PPI experts that you have found and you are talking to, this is for sure a very good idea. And I'm gonna tell you another story. While I was revising one of their proposals, I was very happy to see that they had already formed an advisory board even before they kind of started, right? And guess who was in that advisory board? There were 3 professors part of the PPI advisory board. So I think we still need to work a little bit on the awareness of what we mean by having PPI experts in advisory boards. I think this topic has been also discussed before. In the next slide, so the participation in the study, I think it's very important that the role of the patient expert is clarified. And what we are looking for is to see more and more patient experts being part of decision-making bodies. So part of the governance of your project, it could be work package leads, it could for sure be advisory board members, but remember that patient experts is another important stakeholder. So try to see them as an important stakeholder for your project to be represented. Sensitive data. I think this is becoming more and more important, especially when you bring to your project proposals genetic aspects into it. And we were discussing the other day one project in terms of how are you going to communicate, or how are you going to deal with the fact that you, during your clinical study discover so many information about patients because you are doing this type of interventions with genomic and genetics, would you share that information with their families if it's in terms of children or not? So I think this sensitive data is becoming more and more important, and it's not only about signing the general consent, which is more a formality, but patients would like to know more. Where is this data going? Is it going to third parties? Is it going to be published? Is it going to be reused, the data? And so on and so forth. I think in terms of payment, we have talked about that. What we would love to see is that that is taking into consideration in your calculations as well, because I think some projects maybe forget at the end of the day. So they also talk a lot about patient experts being involved, but at the end of the day, sorry, we don't see any compensation being taken into consideration. And then the next slide, thank you. So dissemination, I think they're very good examples of internal and external dissemination. One example that I can bring, and I was part of one observational study here in Bern, and I was surprised that after 2 months, once the study has been closed, I got an invitation from the principal investigator. They invited all participants from this clinical research. And we had a meeting about 2 or 3 hours. They presented to us the results of their research, even though the results at the end were not very positive because they were not going to continue with other plans they had for this research. But I think it was amazing to meet the other participants during this meeting and have this lay audience being part of communicating officially the results of this project. So coming back to what Marie said, I think we need to be innovative and think a little bit out of the box how we can involve patients in communicating results, also progress with web pages I've seen as well. And coming to the next page, thank you, Tamara. I brought this one because sometimes we are so focused on our own work or your work as research that we forget the best part of here. And what is missing here is really the information that the patient needs to understand and your prospect participants of clinical trials so that they can be fully part of your project. My mom is just taking part of a clinical trial. She was invited in Spain, and nobody asked her why she decided to join this clinical trial, right? So I think we need to try to get closer to the people that are going to participate in your clinical trials. And the next one, I just brought very quickly, I'm not going to go through all that, but I think it's important to be aware of the pitfalls, things that you probably will encounter during writing your proposal, and it's a watch out. I think I mentioned already, don't just tell us that patient organizations have been involved. Try to be a little bit more specific on who they are, with whom have you talked already, and if there's any letter of intent already being signed or discussed. Patient or public involvement is not applicable or relevant for the proposed project. I think the moment your clinical trial touches people, users, consumers, there should be relevant for them. So I'm sure at the beginning, you probably, if it's the first time you work with PPI, it's not clear, but there are people willing to help, and we are here to help as well, how you can find that way to make it relevant for your project. Sometimes it's not easy to find organizations, so we also see some projects stating that they could not find a relevant organization or it doesn't exist. Believe me, at the European level, you can find almost anything. Also, civil associations are part of this equation. And then in the next slide, that's my last slide. I think it's nice to have patient representative being involved in scientific conferences or scientific meetings. Try to give them also the space and the role to be active in those engagements, and not just invite them to be there. So I think we are here to collaborate, co-design, and co-participate in all your activities. With this, I would like to hand over to Stephanie again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just wanted to give some practical advice. I think they are really close to what Cindy already presented. So yeah, I think you should involve the patient representative from the beginning and develop the application together with them. So the 4 months for the PPI preparatory grant is really short. And so ideally, this would be for when you have the activities, but you would already have contacted people before that. I wanted to say that we highly recommend to using the support material from the SCTO. There was a pretty close collaboration to develop that, to make sure that whatever material we use to evaluate matches that. So this is really close to what we use during our evaluation. And as Larissa mentioned, you really need to show the impact and provide evidence for the PPI. And then the final slide, that was already mentioned by Sandra at the beginning, we highly recommend to considering prompts. And we think the priority setting partnership from the James Lind Alliance can be a good tool to define a research question. And with that, we are ready for question. I've put only my contact information because if you have questions regarding IICT, it would be better to go through me. But Larissa is also here for questions if you have any.